So Donald Trump's Department of Justice screwed up so badly that they are now forcing discovery in the New York Attorney General Letitia James case into Donald Trump's behavior, leading to the prosecution of New York Attorney General Letitia James. She filed a motion for vindictive prosecution to dismiss the case against her. And she cites the hundreds and hundreds of statements, the vindictive ones, that Donald Trump made against New York Attorney General Letitia James. But you see, she also cites a filing by the Department of Justice, which they labeled government's notice of reason for not providing pre-vindictive selective prosecution motion related discovery. And what New York Attorney General Letitia James says, well, that's a pretty weird filing to make, a notice that you're not going to comply in the future to turn over discovery documents, emails, text messages, perhaps encrypted messages that relate to vindictive or selective prosecution. So New York Attorney General Letitia James argues that must mean they're hiding this stuff. Isn't the fact that they're giving a notice that they're not going to produce the documents and text messages and emails evidence that this stuff exists? And New York Attorney General Letitia James says, I guess the reason that they claim in this notice that they're not going to turn over these documents during the discovery is because James had not yet made a showing of the precursor for a vindictive prosecution claim. And then she's like, but I'll be happy to make one now. How about we look at Exhibit A? Exhibit A are all of the statements that Donald Trump has made against James, where he calls her scum and this and that and all of these names. Go get her. Pam, go after my enemies. So she's like, we could objectively make this showing very easily. So thank you for admitting these documents exist. But also this shows you how inexperienced the Trump DOJ is. I've never seen in my entire career, and the top federal prosecutors I've talked to, former DOJ top people, they've all told me, Ben, I've never seen anything called notice of reason for not providing pre-vindictive selective prosecution motion-related discovery. What you would do is just, if it didn't exist, you don't turn it over, and then you force the other side to make the motion to release the discovery in a motion to compel, but the government's basically admitting that they're hiding it. So let me just show you what the government said, and let me show you how New York Attorney General Letitia James handled this. And what's incredible is that I think that James is going to be able to make a great case for Donald Trump to have to be a witness, and for his messages via his social media app, Truth Social, and whatever other platforms he uses to send these messages, that can become discoverable. And ultimately, what I think is going to happen, Trump's going to invoke executive privilege. He's going to say, I'm not turning it over. Executive privilege is what's called a limited privilege. It's not absolute. So you can overcome the assertion if you make a compelling showing. New York Attorney General Letitia James will make a compelling showing why this is directly relevant here to vindictive prosecution, where the president of the United States essentially says, hey, everybody, I'm a vindictive human being. Go after my political opponent, Pam Bondi. And then Pam Bondi appoints Lindsay Halligan unlawfully, because she's not really allowed to be a United States attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia on an interim basis, because there was already someone there on an interim basis who was terminated. But that's the point of a whole other motion. And then Halligan vindictively goes after New York Attorney General Letitia James. Just watch how this goes down. So here was the filing that was made November 4th, 2025 by the government. Government's notice of reason for not providing pre-vindictive selective prosecution motion. The United States of America, by and through its attorneys, Lindsay Halligan, and the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. Then it goes on to say, it hereby files a notice for not providing the vindictive selective prosecution related discovery. In an October 24, 2025 proceeding, the court instructed the United States of America to provide defendant with vindictive selective prosecution related discovery before she filed any such motion. Pause there. What the court did was basically give a general standing order, which says turn over your discovery. You could object to it, but you don't have to file a notice of non-compliance. It goes on to say the court instruction is premature, as the government bears no such obligation until a defendant overcomes a significant barrier by advancing objective evidence tending to show the existence of a prosecutorial misconduct. The standard is a rigorous one. So then New York Attorney General Letitia James's lawyer, Abby Lowell, is a great lawyer to be representing her, says, really, you think it's that hard for us to make a rigorous showing? We'll make it very, very easily. And so here's the motion. Attorney General Letitia James, by and through undersigned counsel, moves this court to dismiss the government's indictment pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 12b. As explained further below, the government targeting AG James for prosecution because of the president's genuine animus towards her, protected campaign speech, and fulfillment of her statutory obligations as New York's Attorney General. The indictment is the product of vindictive and selective prosecution in violation of the Fifth Amendment. Because this prosecution is flagrantly unconstitutional, this court should dismiss the indictment with prejudice. And here's where it goes on to talk about, it seems to me that the government's admitting that it has all of this discovery about vindictive prosecution. They want us to make a rigorous showing. Bet we'll make it very easily. You go to page 43 of this motion, and here's what it says. It says, any remaining doubt about the existence of the DOJ's possession of material that might go towards establishing AG's vindictive prosecution or selective claims was obviated by the government's November 4th, 2025 filing of its notice of reason for not providing pre-vindictive selective prosecution motion related discovery. The government's filing states that it bears no such obligation until a defendant overcomes a significant barrier by advancing objective evidence tending to show the existence of prosecutorial misconduct. AG James has exceeded that burden and more. Go to footnote 68. And I know you love the MeidasTouch Network, because guess what we do here that you don't see on corporate news? We go to footnote 68, and here's what it says. If the government did not believe it possessed vindictive selective prosecution-related discovery, the government could have so stated without filing the notice of intent not to produce such discovery. Yet the November 4th notice seemingly contradicts what the government has previously suggested, which is that it has in its possession some discovery relevant to the defense of prosecutorial vindictiveness that would be produced. The government started that process of producing such discovery, and on October 30th, produced just 7 news articles about James's investigation or case. That is all. Then, in a move suggesting the government found additional items, which it did not want to reveal or produce, the notice followed on November 4th, suggesting more discovery exists. Public reporting from the day before also indicated that the FHFA's acting inspector general, Joe Allen, was fired from his role on November 3rd after he made efforts to provide key information to prosecutors in Ms. Halligan's office, according to 4 sources. The information he turned over was constitutionally required or potentially relevant discovery. So do you see what happened there? An inspector general, the person inside FHFA, the Fair Housing Administration, that's that guy Pulte, the Trump sycophant who's out there helping Trump go after enemies by looking through people's mortgages and then trying to contrive criminal cases against them. A person within that organization gave to Lindsay Halligan emails that they identified that would be exculpatory to New York Attorney General Letitia James, and that's being refused to be turned over as well. So it goes on to say the defense is left guessing what other prosecutorial vindictiveness discovery exists. Goes on to talk about the evidentiary standard for a vindictive prosecution discovery may be high, but Attorney General James has provided 6 years of consistent statements by the president and his allies expressly explaining their genuine animus toward James for the exercise of her constitutional and statutory rights. She has provided evidence of the president and his officials' retaliatory actions leading up to this prosecution and the traditions, norms, and rules they are willing to break in order to bring criminal charges against her. She has provided evidence that animus traveled down the chain of command from Trump to Bondi to Mr. Martin, Ed Martin, one of the people who want to go after James, to Ms. Halligan, such that Ms. Halligan's charging decision decision was made at their direction, and she has shown that other similarly situated individuals, all allies of the president, have not been charged, and the special treatment her prosecution has received by DOJ to ensure its survival. This evidence, at the very least, merits discovery into the government's vindictive and selective prosecution claims. So you see there, they're like, okay, sure, the standard's rigorous, but we're going to be able to easily show this. Now, as I mentioned, there's an Exhibit A attached to this. Exhibit A is 112 pages with 360 of Trump's public statements dating back to the day she opened her investigation into the Trump Organization. Now, here's how New York Attorney General Letitia James motion to dismiss for vindictive prosecution and for additional discovery starts. This is powerful, powerful stuff, people. Here's what it says. In ordering Miss Lindsay Halligan to bring the charges against Attorney General James, President Trump, Attorney General Bondi, and Special Attorney for Mortgage Fraud Edward Martin have forgotten that the phrase they frequently invoke applies to them as well. The Constitution requires the law, not retribution, must motivate criminal prosecutions. By the way, under introduction for this section, it says, no one is above the law. After 3 years of investigation, the New York Attorney General's office under AG James' leadership brought a civil action in which the president, 2 of his children, and the Trump Organization were found liable for fraud. This lawsuit and AG James' outspoken criticism of Trump triggered 6 years of targeted attacks. Trump and his allies have used every insulting term in their vocabulary to deride Attorney General James and call for criminal penalties in retaliation for the exercise of her rights and fulfillment of her statutory duties to fulfill her obligation in New York's Attorney General. Since his second inauguration, Trump and his handpicked DOJ officials have exhausted every avenue to secure the payback that the president demanded. But even after stripping AG James' security clearance, creating working groups on weaponization to find anything to substantiate a prosecution against her, commencing a 5-month investigation, and sending a letter threatening her with prosecution if she failed to resign from her position, AG Bondi and Mr. Martin cannot support a criminal charge. That did not sit well with Donald Trump, so the president removed what he viewed as the final roadblock to his plan, the interim United States Attorney Eric Siebert, and installed his own lawyer, Miss Halligan, with the singular mission of churning out indictments against his political enemies. Miss Halligan promptly obeyed. And just think about that. Halligan was never a federal prosecutor before in her life. She was Trump's personal lawyer. She was a beauty contestant turned insurance lawyer who found her way to Mar-a-Lago, became Donald Trump's personal lawyer. And then he made her the top federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia with zero experience as a federal prosecutor or even a trial lawyer. It goes on to say the charges against James constitutes unconstitutional vindictiveness and selective prosecution. AG James has presented substantial direct evidence that she is being prosecuted as a result of the president and his officials' genuine animus toward her exercise of her constitutional and statutory rights. Moreover, she has presented substantial, clear evidence that she was chosen for prosecution because of her exercise of these rights. To preserve the foundational tenets of due process and equal protection under the law, AG James respectfully asked this court to dismiss the indictment with prejudice. Another powerful part of this brief as well is where New York Attorney General Letitia James calls out other individuals in Trump's cabinet who have done the exact thing that they're accusing New York Attorney General Letitia James of. And she calls out people also like Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, declared 3 of his 10 properties as his primary residence. She goes on to talk about Lori Chavez-DeRemer, Sean Duffy, Mr. Zeldin, all have declared multiple properties as their main residence, even though they're using it clearly as a rental residence. And New York Attorney General Letitia James isn't even using it as a rental residence. She gave it to her niece. She publicly disclosed that her niece paid her like $1,500 The covenant has not even been violated by New York Attorney General Letitia James on the second mortgage, rules, whereas Trump's people actually did violate it. So she goes, look at your own people, Trump. So here's the thing. Donald Trump basically set a trap for himself. Then his idiotic DOJ that's completely inexperienced just walked Donald Trump right into the trap, slammed the trap open. And now Lindsey Halligan, Donald Trump, the whole regime is exposed to discovery right now. That's what's going down. There you have it. Comprehensive. We'll get into more footnotes as well on Legal AF about this. Anyway, hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers. We appreciate you all so much and have a wonderful one.
New Meidas merch. Head to store.MeidasTouch.com today and get yourself the best pro-democracy gear and show your support. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.